Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is NTD Reporting for Tribes Report Year 2024. We are pleased to have as our presenters today, Bailey Krause and Reed Kottman. During today's presentation, please ask a question at any time in the Q&A box. You can find the Q&A box in your menu bar. It should be a little square with a question mark in it. If you put your questions in the Q&A box, we can keep track of them and other people will be able to see them. We'll have a written record in most cases. So it's just cleaner and neater and easier if you put your questions there instead of in the chat box. If you don't have a copy of the handouts that should have been in the email that I sent out to you, I will paste that link in the chat box in just a few minutes. And I will be manning the chat box. If anybody has any questions or needs anything, just hit me up. Other than that, I believe that's it for my housekeeping list. And I will now turn things over to Bailey.
All right. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate you as always. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the 2024 NTD Reporting for Tribes webinar. My name is Bailey Krause, and I'm joined by Reed Kottman. If you have any questions as we go through the presentation, again, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. Okay. As a disclaimer, the contents of this presentation are intended to provide clarity regarding the existing requirements of the FTA and NTD. Please always feel free to refer to the statutes and regulations for requirements. The goal of this webinar is to identify changes for the upcoming report year and to provide an overview of NTD reporting requirements and how to apply those requirements to the system. Again, this presentation has been created specifically for tribal transit reporters. Here's the agenda. First, I will do a quick overview of the NTD and then move on to important changes and clarifications for the 2024 report year. Next, we will review fundamentals of NTD reporting, and we will discuss how to get started in the NTD reporting system. Then Reed will take over and discuss how to complete the annual report, including some common reporting challenges. Lastly, we will review the validation and closeout process. So we do have a lot on the docket, and so we may go a little quick. Great. Here's the contact information for the National Transit Database. If at any point you require technical assistance while completing your report, please reach out to your analyst. If you encounter any technical issues with the system, you may contact the FTA IT Help Desk or your analyst. If you need help with accessing our published data products, please feel free to email our help desk between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. If you do it after that, then they'll just get back to you the next day. Reed and my contact information is listed here. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about this presentation, or of course you can reach out to Courtney as well if she's your analyst. In addition to our contact information, we also wanted to provide the FTA program contacts here, Chelsea Champlin and Thomas Coleman. The key reference documents for NTD reporting are located mostly here and will include the policy manual, of which an updated copy for report year 2024 is currently available, the glossary, user guide, and the transit asset management guidebooks. If you do need this as a web link, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to get that to you as well. Now that we've completed some housekeeping items, we're going to go now onto a quick overview of the National Transit Database. All right, what is the National Transit Database, or NTD? Well, NTD was established to be the nation's primary source of information and statistics on all public transit modes in the United States. It's a source of data for performance measurement, benchmarking, as well as research. Recipients and subrecipients of Chapter 53 funds report to the NTD. Reporters may include those that have received funding in the past and are still required to report based on continuing grant requirements, as well as some who report voluntarily and wish to receive Chapter 5311 funds in the future. 5311 subrecipients and recipients are required to report due to their grant requirements as stated here from the associated legislation from Chapter 5335. NTD data is due on the following dates: October 31st, January 31st, and April 30th. These are assigned depending on your agency's reported fiscal year end date. Please note that the last date to submit your report revision for your reporting group. After this date, your report will not be sent back for further revisions. This is also found in the policy manual if you'd like to refer to it in the future. All right, now we're going to go on to the changes and clarifications for report year 2024 that may affect your report. As you may have remembered, report year 2023, there were a lot more of these. So this year we scaled it back a bit. So first we will go over the General Transit Fee Specification, or GTFS requirement. GTFS data was a new requirement for report year 2023 that required agencies who operate a fixed route mode, such as bus, commuter bus, or ferry boat, to upload a GTFS data feed for the service. Each year, agencies must confirm that that feed is up to date. Please note that it should be uploaded as a directly downloadable link. In report year 2024, you will recertify the current GTFS data feed in the system and update the current GTFS data if there have been any changes to your fixed route service. If you requested a waiver for this requirement in report year 2023, you will need to upload a GTFS feed this year. On your agency's D10, you will now see a page where you will confirm that the link is up to date, and we'll go over that shortly. If you require assistance with your GTFS data feed, please feel free to use the resources provided by National RTEP, which are included here on the slide. These include their free GTFS builder, as well as open office hours on Thursday between 1 and 1:30 Eastern. They are more than happy to help, so please reach out to them if you do have any questions. The next update is a clarification regarding question 8 of the B15 form. We want to clarify. The B15 short form should include all of your agency's demand response services, which includes paratransit and dollar ride services if you operate both. Question 8 should depict the eligibility of these services for each day of the week. Typically, there should only be yes marked for multiple columns if your agency has multiple services with different eligibility for each. We will go over these more in more context, and you're thinking, Bailey, what is question 8? We'll go over it in a short bit. Please use this slide as a resource when determining how to report your agency's demand response service eligibility on question 8 of the B15 form. You can access these definitions on question 8 of the B15 by selecting the blue question mark for each eligibility column. If you are unsure of how to report your service's eligibility, please contact your analyst. Another clarification on the B15 form is for question 9. I know I'm talking about questions you haven't seen in a while. So for question 9, you should report the minimum advance reservation time for your agency's demand response service. If your agency requires passengers to reserve a trip prior to a certain time the day before, please report 1 day for question number 9. If your agency's demand response services have different reservation time, please report the shortest reservation time of these services. We're just trying to standardize things. All right, another question. So for question 10 of the B15, please report the most commonly charged fare for your agency's demand response services, excluding special discounts. So if your service does not require fares but accepts donations, please do not report a value for question 10. Please keep in mind that this is different than the RR20, where you would report donations made on board the vehicle as passenger fares. As a reminder for the B15 form, the data that you entered last year will be pre-populated for this year's report. In report year 2024, please just review the data and revise if needed. If you add a new demand response mode, however, this form will be blank. So, and then next year it'll be pre-populated for you. Another clarification for report year 2024 concerns agencies splitting data between multiple reports. If two agencies have an agreement where one operates routes that span both agencies' service areas, the agency may split the service by reporting the route that you operate. if you have a full cost contract, there's a lot of other minutia. However, agencies may not split individual vehicle trips between NTD reports. This is usually seen for demand response modes. Again, if there is a mixing of passengers, the data must be reported by the operator of service. If you are a subsidy reporter, wrong finger. Just talk to your analyst. There should be no change in how you report this information. All right, so this clarification is for typical and atypical services. So fixed route mode agencies are no longer required to distinguish between atypical and typical services. So please continue to report the annual totals as applicable for these modes. So continue as is. The final clarification for this year is for vehicles with adaptive seating capacities. So some vehicles have the ability to add or remove seats in order to increase cargo space or passenger accommodations. If your agency is reporting a vehicle with adaptive seating, please report the full seating capacity of the vehicle on the A30 form, regardless of the current configuration. So for example, if a vehicle has a potential capacity of 15, but only 12 of those seats are installed, please report the seating capacity of 15 for this vehicle, so you don't have to go back and forth and update it as you go. Great, now we are going to move on to system updates for report year 2024. And hopefully you'll be a little excited about some of these. These are some good ones. The View Previous Year Data Link is a new feature that will allow you to quickly reference the prior year's same report form. For example, when reviewing the B10 form, you can select the View Previous Year Data link to pull up the prior year's B10 form in a new window. This is available for all forms in the package, but will not include any attachments such as the narrative report. If you require the narrative report, please reach out to your analyst and be more than happy to provide last year's narrative report to you for review. Great. In question 8 of the B15 form, here's the B15 I've been referencing already. So this has been updated to include low income as a service eligibility option. Low income is included in the same service eligibility column as age or disability. Please note that this column can be marked yes if the service is open to either option. It does not need to be both age and disability as well as low income exclusive. On to the next one. So new for the 830 form, a prompt will now appear when updating the active vehicles field to 0. This prompt will ask you to confirm whether or not you wish to retire the fleet. As a reminder, please do not delete fleets on the A30 form unless they were added in error. The FFA10 form also experienced 2 updates. The first is that you will not be able to update the FFA10 without first saving the B10 and RR20. Data in the FFA10 is generated from both of these forms. The form will be locked until the data is saved. After saving those forms, you can go back into the form and update the FFA10 as applicable with the allocations of your service. Reed will be going into the FFA10 in more detail in a little bit, so you'll be able to see what we're talking about in a little more detail. The next enhancement is a recalculate form button. Before, you would need to zero the data to be able to update the allocation percentages. Now you'll just be able to refresh the data as well as the percentages with this button after updating the columns. Again, Reed is going to be going over this form later and you'll see how this will work. As mentioned earlier, if applicable to you, the D10 will now include an area to recertify your GTFS feed link. You will only need to recertify it once during the report year. If you need to make any updates to the link, this will be done on your agency's P50 form that is located in your profile. And we'll go over where to find it in your profile momentarily. Just a quick reminder to round out the section, the Unique Entity ID or UEID is an agency-specific identifier used to import agency information from SAM.gov. If you have a UEID, please review the P10 form and confirm that your UEID is up to date or update it as needed. That concludes the report year 2024 clarifications and updates. And next, we're going to move on to a review of NTD reporting from fundamentals. Great. The service data reported to the NTD must be public transit. But what does that mean? Open to the public means that the service is open to the general public except for segments as defined by age, disability, or low income. The service must also be shared ride, as in there must be an attempt to share the vehicle with other passengers. As mentioned here, neither the rider nor driver may deny use of empty seats to another rider. After determining if you can report the data, the mode level comes next. These two modes are the most common reported modes by rural reporters: demand response, or DR, and bus, or MB. Bus service is defined as a vehicle powered by a motor and containing fuel within it. It can include services that have route deviation, point deviation, or deviated fixed route. Demand response is defined as service scheduled in response to calls from passengers, such as a dial ride. These modes will be updated on the profile's P20 form. Another popular mode in the rural module is the commuter bus mode. To clarify, commuter bus operates with more than 5 miles of closed-door service, and the same type of vehicles are consistently operated on the service. If you think you have both commuter bus and bus service, please keep in mind that a vehicle shouldn't be used between modes on the same day. This also applies to the driver's work assignments, which are typically separate. If you are currently reporting both commuter bus and believe you may only need to report one mode, please contact your analyst for assistance so that we can help determine how it should be reported and provide steps on how to change this in the reporting system if appropriate. The next topic we'll cover is types of service. Currently in the NTD, there are two main types of service: directly operated, or DO, and purchased transportation, or PT. Directly operated is when the service is operated by the agency and uses the agency's employees. Purchased transportation is when the vehicles are operated by the seller's employees. The service is branded as the buyer's, and the buyer is paying the full cost of the service. Within the purchased transportation category, there are 3 types: TX for services operated by a taxi provider, T and TN for services operated by a transportation network company, or TNC. If the service is operated by a contractor that is neither a taxi provider nor an TNC, the type of service would remain PT, or purchased transportation. After the mode and type of service is determined, the next question is, what data should you be collecting for these services? Here are some of the data points, as well as the abbreviations that are used throughout this presentation and on the report. These data points are collected on a per mode and type of service basis, except for sponsored unlinked passenger trips, which are only collected by the demand response mode types. Again, these are the common abbreviations, and I will be referring to them as such throughout the presentation, like VRM and VRH. So speaking of those two, we're going to first cover vehicle revenue miles, or VRM, and vehicle revenue hours, or VRH. Revenue service is when vehicles are transporting passengers or are able to transport passengers. This includes layover and recovery time. Revenue service does not include deadhead, which I'll get into in just a moment, driver training, school bus or charter services, and vehicle maintenance. The main point is that you need to have the expectation of carrying passengers. But again, what is deadhead and why isn't it reported? Deadhead is when there is no expectation of carrying passengers. This includes leaving or returning to the garage or yard facility or changing routes. There are detailed tables found within the NTD policy manual, which provide further examples of what is and what is not considered revenue service. We will review those tables in just a few slides. Some transportation services, such as meal delivery services or other non-passenger services, are not reportable to the NTD as they do not meet FTA's definition of public transportation. Please omit the operating expenses and service data for these services from your NTD report. If 5311 funding is used for these projects, please report the funds that were spent in the funding line but omit them from the operating expenses by mode and type of service. This is pretty uncommon. Here's the table for the demand response mode of what is and what is not considered revenue service. Please note that the time and miles from when the vehicle is dispatched from the garage to pick up a passenger are not considered revenue service until they reach the pickup point. On the other end of that example, the time and miles from the last drop off back to the dispatching point are also not considered revenue service. Following up on the previous slide, this is a rundown of what is and what is not considered revenue service for the bus mode. Again, from the garage to the first stop of the route is not considered revenue service, and from the last drop-off point back to the garage is not considered revenue service. Both of these tables are found in the policy manual and may be helpful to review if you have questions as to what is and what is not revenue service. Sponsored trips or sponsored UPT on linked passenger trips are trips that are paid in part or in full by a third party. These may be part of a coordinated human services transportation plan. Common sponsors are the VA, Medicaid, and assisted living centers. Sponsored UPT should be reported as a subset of the total unlinked passenger trips for all demand response modes and should be counted each time a passenger boards the vehicle. Great. Vehicles operated in annual maximum service, or VOMs, are the number of revenue vehicles an agency operates to meet the annual maximum service requirement. VOMs are counted during the peak season of the year at the busiest day. This count should include any volunteer vehicles that were used in maximum service. This shouldn't be the number of active vehicles your agency has, but rather how many vehicles are used at once during peak service. Again, we're looking for a snapshot of one point during the day, not the entire fleet of vehicles used over the course of the day. All right. Made it through the service data definitions. Now we're going to talk about financial requirements. NTD reporting requirements for financial data generally follow generally accepted accounting principles in accrual accounting. In accrual accounting, the revenue is recorded when earned, regardless of when payment is received, and expenses are recorded when the liability occurs, regardless of when the payment is made. Please see the example here in the policy manual for more detail. Next, we're going to review the type of expenses. First up is operating expenses. Operating expenses are exactly that. Those are the day-to-day expenses that a transit agency incurs. These may be for operating and maintaining vehicles, maintaining other equipment, planning costs, admin costs, as well as the other examples here. Capital assistance spent on operations is when capital funding is spent on activities that are normally considered operating, such as preventative maintenance and the purchase of tires. Please make sure to break this out of your other operating funding line items, as this has a different match percentage. There's a separate field on this for the RR20 form for certain funding sources, such as 5311 or 5310. Capital expenses are those that are related to the purchase of equipment. Equipment means an article of non-expendable personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year. The equipment will have an acquisition cost, which equals the lesser of capitalization level established by the government unit for financial statement purposes, or $5,000 as determined by FTA. Again, you may have a lower limit than the established limit, and that is perfectly acceptable. The next financial item I'd like to cover is what to do when your agency reports multiple modes and how you'll need to allocate expenses for shared costs if needed. In this case, your agency has more than 2 modes. The operating costs will be broken out between the modes based on direct and shared expenses. Once the direct expenses for each mode are identified and broken out, the remaining shared expenses may be calculated between the modes based on a cost allocation method. Please note that this is only acceptable for shared expenses. There should be some expenses that are direct to each mode, such as fuel, wages, or marketing materials. And once you use one allocation method, you will stick with that allocation method. All right. Please note that you should be reporting what you have spent, not what you have been awarded. In this case, you would be receiving $275,000 in funds. However, you only spent 178 of that. You would report the 178,000 in your report. Switching gears slightly, we will mention capital responsibility multiple times throughout this presentation with regards to TAM plans and assets. Please see the list here to determine whether or not an agency has direct capital responsibility for an asset. As a note for the third bullet, an infrastructure asset itemized as a capital line item in the budget does not necessarily mean an agency has direct capital responsibility. An agency must also have management or oversight responsibilities for that line item project. In addition, performing minimal preventative maintenance work doesn't necessarily indicate direct capital responsibility. All right, this concludes this section, and now that we've completed a high-level review of the definitions and acronyms of NTD reporting, we're going to go ahead and jump into NTD interface and account user management. The NTD homepage is found at www.transit.gov.gov/NTD. This is where the data products, policy manuals, and a clickable link to get into the reporting system are housed. Everything. All right. You will click on the blue link that reads, this is getting logged in now, I'm sorry. You are going to click on the blue link before that says, if you are a non-FTA user, click this link to log in. You will click on that link. From there, it will prompt you to log into login.gov. Please make sure to set this up with the same email address you use for NTD reporting. If you lose your password, you will go through login.gov to recover it. You will not go through that Faces page. In addition to email and password, login.gov will require the use of at least one secondary authentication method, such as a code delivered through a text message or a phone call. Once set up, whichever method was chosen will be used when logging into the NTD reporting session. After logging in, all users land on the homepage, the Appian platform, which houses NTD, TRAMs, and FACES. Here, you will select NTD in order to access your report. If you would like to automatically go into the NTD site every time you log in, you can click on the star at the top right of the NTD box, and this will save your preference. The NTD homepage allows you to directly access your NTD report from the front page by selecting either the folder icon or the pencil icon. Next is the task tab. This section will house any tasks that are assigned to you, such as a report year kickoff if you are the CEO, CO delegate, or NTD contact. To access your report packages, you will want to ensure that you are on the home page. From here, you will select the annual tab, and it will populate any open NTD reports for your agency. You can access the forms one of two ways. You can either click on the NTD folder with NTD ID with the folder icon on the left, which will direct you to the report package summary page. This route will allow you to access related actions for the package, such as submission or reporter requests. If you would like to only edit the forms, you can click on the pencil icon to the right-hand side of the page, and the system will take you directly to the clickable list of forms to edit. All right, and you'll want to make sure that you're looking at fiscal year 2024. You will see 2025 in there. Not click it. We're not in 2025 yet. Only click 2024. You won't see any forms there, so it'll just be a dead end. All right, to access reporter profiles, you will click on profiles from the homepage, and then click on your NTD ID. And then it will load a summary page. This is where you'll edit your mode, your basic information, as well as viewing other users from your agency. To view the individual forms, you'll click on the pencil icon on the right-hand side, just like you did for the packages, which will allow you to access the P10 I talked about earlier, the P20 for modes and other profile forms, such as that P50 for the TTFS feed, for example. To access other profile options, you can click on the NTD ID folder icon on the left. Let's see here, going on. Once you click on the NTD ID icon on the left, you will see the profile summary page. Again, you can click on related actions to go through the individual forms themselves. All right. Located in the profile is also the form library, where you can see data from previous years that have been submitted to the NTD. You will use the dropdown to select the package and then the link in blue for whichever form you want. and these will be downloaded in an HTML format. In addition to viewing the forms and the related actions tab, you can go ahead and print the previous year's package in full rather than 4 by form. Other actions you can complete here, like I said earlier, is updating your basic information, updating your modes, reviewing other users, and then if applicable to you, the P50 form will be here for GTFS feeds. If you do select that print button to download the selected annual report package, you will be taken to a new page where you'll see the refresh button. Please wait a few minutes to click the refresh button so that it can be generated. After it is generated, it will show up as a blue link under your NTD ID. As seen here, it can kind of look like it's hiding a little bit, so we did want to make sure to point that out where it was. Right, going on to user management, each agency must have at least one user manager. So this is the person that will be able to add, remove, and edit users within your agency. For further information, you can contact your analyst, or you can see the link here for steps. If you need a new user manager, please reach out to your analyst. Here are the user roles within the NTD reporting system. Please note that there can only be one CEO and NTD contact. There must be a CEO in order to submit the report. Otherwise, the CEO delegate can do all the same actions as the CEO, and the NTD contact can submit the packages after the original submission. If you are already a user in the system and need to unlock your account, there are 2 different ways to complete this. You can either unlock your account if you have set up security questions, which we'll go over in the next slide, or you can submit an unlock request. If you submit an unlock request, the request will go to your agency's user managers. It is important to note, even if you are locked out, you can still log into the NTD system. However, any report forms, the information won't be available until you are unlocked using either of these 2 options. So if you log in and you're saying, I don't see anything, go ahead and unlock yourself and it should populate immediately. As mentioned, you'll have to set up your security questions beforehand so you can unlock yourself. You'll be able to unlock your own account. To set up these questions, first go to the top right-hand corner of your screen and select Profile. Click on Related Actions, and then Manage Security Questions. From there, the system will provide steps to create the security questions, and it's pretty quick, pretty painless. All right, next we're going to go over the report year kickoff to start this year off. The report year kickoff task, again, will appear for the list in the task list for NTD contacts, CEO delegates, and CEOs. You will need to click on the task, click Accept, then Proceed. This will assign it to you, and it will only appear in your task list. You will need to verify the users on the P30. If any users need to be updated, you can complete the kickoff, then as user manager, then ask your user manager to make those updates. If you need additional user managers added, again, please contact your analyst and we'd be happy to help. Next, you're going to review your agency's current modes. These are pre-populated from the prior year. Please do not enter an end date to your mode unless your mode has actually ended. This isn't just saying at the end of the year. No, it's saying I'm never going to run this directly operated demand response ever again. So if it hasn't ended, don't enter anything. All right. After clicking on the previous continue, you will go to the Transit Asset Management sponsor page. So this is where you'll advise who your sponsor for your TAM plan is. If you had one in the prior year, it will pre-populate as seen here, and you'll click continue. But you're saying, Bailey, I didn't have one last year. If you need to add one, you can search for your sponsor by name or NTD ID and add them. If you do not have one, you can go ahead and you complete your own TAM plan, your narrative report. You'll click on continue and leave that area blank. Next, you're going to confirm your emergency contact that you entered last year. If it's correct, click continue. Otherwise, you can update from this form and go to that P10, or you can go ahead and complete the kickoff and go into the P10 if you need to later and you're not sure who it will be, or if it needed to be updated and you're not quite sure who. All right, next you're going to confirm the reporter type for the current year. As noted here, all NTD tribes are small system reporters, and you'll confirm that no is selected and click on continue. After clicking on continue, it basically looks like the same exact question, but it's not. This is saying for next year, who is it going to be? You're to still select no, because you're still going to be a small system waiver, and click on submit. So yay. Once you click on submit, you'll see this box that populates stating that the kickoff has been completed, and it may take a couple of minutes to populate your forms. This may take longer to populate based on how large your agency is. You'll click on OK, then go back to your home page. If you have any issues with the kickoff, please contact your analyst. Once the kickoff is completed, it's time to enter data on forms. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Reed to go over completing the annual report, submission, and validation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reed Kottman, and I will be taking us through how to complete the annual report for 2024. Great. So to access your report, like Bailey said, you'll navigate to the NTD homepage and ensure that the annual tab is open. Then you'll select your agency's report package from this list, as seen in the screenshot. From the report package summary view, select the annual forms button in the top right-hand corner to open the editable list of forms. Once the list of forms is open, you can select the hyperlinked form name to begin reporting on that form. Here are the list of forms that will appear in your typical 2024 annual report, but please note that some of these forms may vary depending on the modes and types of service you operate. We will walk through completing each of these forms, but again, please note that they might vary from reporter to reporter. All right, the first form we'll take a look at is the Basic Information B10 form. If you completed an annual NTD report last year, the information on the B10 form should pre-populate. If your agency received or benefited from 5307 funds, which is rare for tribal reporters, but it does happen, please mark yes for the question in the top right, and then contact your NTD analyst for next steps. The demographic information section of the B10 form is pre-populated from the prior year's report, so please review the information to confirm that the data is correct. If there have been any changes to the areas your agency serves, such as serving a new state or an urban area, you may proceed with updating the data here in the applicable section. Now, your agency's data, again, should already appear in the tribal demographic section of the B10 form, but please be sure to review that data just to make sure it's up to date and there aren't any changes that need to be made. Alrighty. The auxiliary section should only be completed if another agency reports assets on your behalf or service data on your behalf that's not included in your own report. Now, the auxiliary sections are pretty rare, especially for tribal reporters, so please do not complete this section without discussing it first with your NTD analyst. And then that'll be it for the B10 form. Once you've reviewed everything, you may proceed with selecting Save and Validate in the bottom right-hand corner, and we can move on to the next form. And the next form is the Geographic Area Coverage B15 form. So starting last report year, agencies with demand response modes began completing this report form, which contains 10 questions about their geographic service area coverage. Now, agencies must complete one B15 form for each demand response mode and type of service combination that they report. If you completed the B15 form last year, your responses will actually pre-populate in this year's report. You should review your responses and ensure they are up to date. And if you started a new demand response mode for this report year, 2024, you should complete a brand new B15 form for that new mode. All right, so that B15 form, we'll walk through each question. So there are 10 questions in total, and some questions will be dynamic based on your selections to the previous questions. So question number 1 asks if you serve residents in another state besides your own. Please select yes or no for that one. And then in question number 2, it allows you to select the counties that your agency serves, either in whole or in part, where you pick up residents for a new trip origin. So you should start by selecting Add, after which you can choose your state and report the counties. Now, question 3 allows you to select the census designated places that are served within each of your counties. You can select, you can then report the service level for each of those census designated places, which will be wholly served or partially served. Please note that you can download the counties and census designated places in a reference file directly from the reporting system in this B15 form. The report is an Excel file that populates based on the counties you entered in question number 2 and will contain all of the corresponding census designated places so that you can complete question number 3 if you're not sure what CDPs your agency serves. Okay, so question number 4 asks if any portion of your demand response service is intended to meet the Americans with Disabilities Act or ADA complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route mode. Please select yes or no for this one. And please note that you should only select yes if your service provides the ADA paratransit for a specific fixed route system. So the question does not refer to whether your system is generally just open to ADA passengers or ADA compliant. If you select yes, question number 5 asks if your service area is limited to your own NTD ID, and if it is, you can select yes for this one. Now, if the ADA service serves other NTD reporters, it fulfills their requirements for a fixed route service, please select no for question number 5. And then this should prompt you to search what NTD IDs that this demand response service covers. All right, question number 6 asks if you have different passenger eligibility requirements or different terms and conditions of service. Select yes or no. Question number 7 asks which days of the week you operate and for which you should select the applicable checkboxes. When you're done selecting your days, select the button Create Days of the Week on the right-hand side of the page. This will populate the selected days in question number 8. Now, for question number 8, you should first report the service start and end time for each day that your service is open. You will also answer basic questions about these services as seen in the column headers under question number 8 shown in the screenshot. Now, Bailey discussed the recent reporting clarifications for this question at the beginning of the presentation, but if you have any questions or specific items that you need to discuss with us, please contact your NTD validation analyst. Now, question number 9 asks for the minimum advance reservation time for your service. Enter the numeric minimum, then indicate whether the number corresponds to days or hours. As a reminder, if you require passengers to reserve their trip by a certain time the day before the trip, report 1 day for this question. Additionally, if different services within your demand response mode have different advanced reservation requirements, you should report the shortest minimum advanced reservation time required of those services. And finally, question number 10, which asks for the fare charge for the service. You should not include donations in this field. Again, you'll report those as passenger paid fares in the RR20, but we don't want them on the B15. But we do encourage you to contact your analyst if you have any questions about question number 10 or any of the other questions on the B15 form. All right, moving swiftly on, we are now on to the B30 contractual relationship form. Now, the B30 form captures data related to contracts with other transit agencies. This contracted service is considered purchased transportation and must meet one of the following 3 criteria. Either the buyer must pay the full cost of the service must operate under the name of the buyer, and the seller must manage and operate the service. Now, that's different for subsidies, but we'll touch on that a bit later. So to add a new contractual relationship, select the Add New Contract button on the top right of the page. Next, select the type of agency that you have a contract with. Please note, if you select NTD Reporter, you will need to select the agency from a list that will generate after making this selection. Once the Continue button is selected, you will be presented with this page. On the left, you will need to complete the contract summary section, which provides basic information about the agreement. Please contact your analyst if you have any questions about completing this section. When the contract summary section is completed, you may proceed with selecting the Add New Mode / Type of Service button in the Key Financial Operational Statistics section. Once selected, you can enter the mode and type of service used in the agreement. Once the mode has been added, you can enter the key financial and operations data on the bottom right of the form. Once completed, select Save and Validate and Close to exit the form. If a contract that is pre-populated from a prior year is no longer, you may use the Remove Contractual Relationship button. Now, subsidies, which are much more common for your reporter type, these are also captured in the B30 form. Subsidy agreements apply if your agency contributes an annual subsidy to a local transit agency without covering the whole cost of service. So, for example, if you provide an agency with a fixed amount annually to extend their service into your tribal area, this would be considered a subsidy agreement. A subsidy agreement will be captured on the B30 form very similarly to how we discussed a purchase transportation agreement would, with the mode and type of service reported. Again, the B30 form is complicated and very specific to your agency, so please contact your analyst if you have any questions. Awesome. Next, we will discuss the A10 Stations and Maintenance Facilities form. So the first section of the A10 form collects data regarding passenger stations. Please note that bus stops or bus shelters are not reportable as passenger stations. If you're unsure if you have a reportable passenger station, please contact your analyst. You can also take a look at the policy manual, which has specifics on what is reportable and what is not. The A10 captures the type and number of maintenance facilities your agency utilizes for their public transit service. Report facilities based on the ownership types for those facilities, whether they are owned by your agency, leased from another public agency, or leased from a private entity. The definition of maintenance facility is a garage or building where mechanics perform maintenance and repairs and typically serve as operating garages. Please note that you should not include bus barns in this count, and nor should you include any third-party facility where you might bring your vehicles for repairs, such as a Jiffy Lube. If one facility is shared by two or more modes, say demand response and bus, you should report an allocated share between applicable modes. This could be based on any data point that indicates how much of the facility is used per mode. But one of the most common approaches is to allocate the facility based on the number of vehicles it services. To look at an example, let's say an agency owns one maintenance facility and operates both a demand response service and a fixed route bus service. Both modes use this maintenance facility, and the agency owns 10 vehicles in total. The demand response mode runs 6 vehicles, and the bus mode runs 4 vehicles. In this example, we would expect to see 0.6 facilities reported in the demand response A10 form and 0.4 facilities reported in the bus A10 form. Please ensure that the total number of facilities you report across all A10 forms equals that whole number. Next, we will discuss the Transit Asset Management Facilities Inventory A15 form. The A15 form collects basic information on facilities that your agency uses to supply public transit service. On this form, you should report the administrative and maintenance facilities for which your agency has capital responsibility. You should report all passenger and parking facilities that your agency uses in public transit service, regardless of who has capital responsibility. Please note that if your agency reports a maintenance facility as owned on an A10 form, you would typically expect that the facility would appear on the A15 form as well, as long as your agency's transit use for that facility is greater than just incidental. To complete this form, select the Add New button, followed by Add Facility. This will allow you to begin entering data for that facility. When adding a facility, there are 3 sections that must be completed: facility information, condition assessment, and address. Once all sections have been fully completed, you may select the Continue to proceed with adding the facility to the form. If you are unsure of how to complete any of the data fields, you may refer to the 2024 NTD Reduced Reporting Policy Manual for details. Existing facility information will pre-populate from report year 2023, so you will only need to go in and add new facilities if there has been a change. You can also update the information for existing facilities if those have changed as well. If you do not have any reportable facilities, please select the No Data to Report checkbox prior to saving the form. Next, we'll review the Revenue Vehicle Inventory A30 form. If you completed this form last year, your data from report year 2023 will already pre-populate, which again means that you will only need to add new fleets or edit existing fleets if needed. You can enter new fleets by adding the Add New Fleet button, or you can edit an existing fleet by selecting the RVID link for that fleet towards the left of the table. When adding a new fleet, the first section that you will see is the basic information. You should complete all required fields for this fleet. And now some examples of fields in this section include vehicle type, total vehicles, ownership type, and funding type. The next section is vehicle information. Again, complete all required fields in this section. Fuel type was introduced as a new field for tribal reporters in report year 2023, and the selections you reported last year will populate along with the rest of that fleet's data. Transit agencies must report the number of active vehicles in each fleet at the end of their fiscal year, so that last day of the fiscal year. Total vehicles represent how many vehicles there are in that fleet you are reporting. Active vehicles indicates the number of vehicles that provide regular transit service and include spare vehicles, whereas inactive vehicles may include any of the following: vehicles that are awaiting sale or disposal, vehicles that are in storage or in part of an FTA-approved emergency contingency plan, or vehicles that are out for major repairs. Now, as a quick reporting reminder, please remember to mark fleets as retired in the reporting system if the vehicles have been sold or disposed of, rather than deleting the fleets. To retire a fleet, update the number of active vehicles to 0, after which you will see the automated prompt asking, "Is this fleet retired?" for which you should answer yes. You should only delete fleets if they have been added to the form in error, or if you are removing a duplicate after using the Add Existing Fleet function. All right, the next form is the Service Vehicle Inventory A35 form. Agencies must report service vehicle fleets for which they have capital responsibility. Service vehicles includes cars used for administrative staff, transit police cars, and tow trucks. Because service vehicles must be roadworthy or road legal in order to be reported, agencies should not report small forklifts, golf carts, or any type of construction equipment that is not roadworthy. This form works in a similar manner as the A15 form. To create a fleet, select Add New. Please ensure that you report revenue vehicles on the A30 form and only service vehicles on the A35 form. In other words, you should not report vehicles on the on the A35 form if the vehicles are also used to transport passengers. If they transport passengers, they should go on the A30. Right, so to report the service fleet information for this vehicle fleet, select the vehicle type from a drop-down menu, which consists of 3 options: automobiles, trucks and other rubber-tired vehicles, and steel wheel vehicles. Automobiles are passenger cars, up to and including station wagons in size. If you have a service vehicle that is a minivan or anything larger, report them as trucks and other rubber-tired vehicles. Estimated costs is the most recent estimate of the full cost to replace the fleet. If you do not have a recent estimate for that vehicle, you may report the original cost of the fleet or its insured value. You must also report the year that corresponds to that dollar value that you report in that field. All right, and then once you're complete there, you can select Save and Validate on the A35 form. Again, if you do not have any reportable service vehicles, select the No Data to Report checkbox prior to saving the form. Next, we will review the Transit Asset Management Performance Measure Targets A90 form. Now, I should note that you won't have this form if you participate in a group TAM plan, but if you do not have a group TAM plan, you will have to complete the A90 form. So the A90 form captures the number of your agency's assets that have reached or exceeded their useful life. The form compares the data reported on the asset form, so A15, A30, and A35, to your current year targets for the state of those assets. If your agency participates, again, in a transit asset management group plan, you will not have to complete this form. The first section of the A90 form, rolling stock, is for the revenue vehicles reported on the A30 form. For asset types that you report on the A30 form, you will report the percentage of the total that you expect to meet or exceed their useful life in fiscal year 2025, so next year. For asset types that you are not reporting, please select that NA checkbox on the far right. The second section is for the service vehicles reported on the A35, and it's the same situation as the section above. Select the NA checkbox for vehicles that you are not reporting, or report that target percentage for those that you are. The third section is for the facilities reported on the A15 form. If a facility is below a 3 on the condition scale, it would be reported as having exceeded its useful life. The final portion of the A90 form is the narrative report. The narrative report is required for agencies with their own TAM plan and should include a narrative or a write-up that describes the state of the different asset types and includes any changes that may affect the progress towards the condition targets reported on the A90. Please upload the narrative report to the bottom left of the A90 form and select Save and Validate. All right, the next form is the Reduced Reporting RR20, which contains your agency's financial, service, and resource data. When you open the RR20 form, the first two sections are total funds expended and funds expended by mode. The funds expended section allows you to manually input your operating and capital expenses for each mode that you operate. In this example, this agency operates two modes: demand response directly operated and bus directly operated. The agency reported an annual total of $325,000 in operating expenses and $250,000 in capital expenses, and reported the corresponding annual totals for each of those modes in their respective fields just below it. Please note that these totals are rounded for the example of this presentation only. Typically, these numbers won't be rounded. You should report all funds that your agency expended towards public transit service. Do not limit your expenses to federal grant programs. In the subsequent sections of the RR20 form, you will identify the various sources of funds that supported your transit system throughout that fiscal year. We will cover the different funding sources categories in the next few slides, and as you begin to report your funding sources, the system will automatically calculate a running total in the total funds expended section. In this example, the agency has reported all funding sources, which totaled $325,000 in operations and $250,000 in capital. The sum of your funding sources typically match what you entered in the funds expended section, as shown in this screenshot. The operating expenses match, as shown by the totals in red, and the capital expenses match, as shown by the totals in green. Agencies that operate more than one mode are required to capture and report actual expenses by mode and type of service. If you have more than one mode, you should determine which expenses are direct expenses and can be easily traced to the specific mode. Direct costs may include driver's wages or vehicle repairs for specific mode vehicles. And then for the remaining joint or shared expenses, which are costs that are incurred for the benefit of more than one mode and cannot be traced, you may allocate those remaining costs. An example of shared costs may be a transit manager's salary that supports both demand response and fixed route services. You may allocate shared costs by using an allocation factor method, such as vehicle revenue miles, unlinked passenger trips, vehicle revenue hours, or number of employees per mode. But please note that this should stay consistent from report year to report year. Next, on the RR20 form, this section begins the different funding source categories. This is fare revenues. So fare revenues include all income received and expended directly from passengers, which include those donations that are made on board the vehicle. This section is broken down between passenger paid fares and organization paid fares. It is also broken down by mode and type of service. So if your agency reports 2 or more modes or types of service, passenger paid fares are those that are traditionally considered as passenger paid fares, in which a rider pays to board the vehicle. This category includes full adult fares, senior citizen fares, student fares, child fares, and fares for individuals with disabilities. This section also includes donations, again, that are made on board that vehicle in lieu of paying a fare. Organization paid fares are those that an organization pays for or pays through a third party rather than the passenger themselves. One common example of an organization paid fare is a university paying a transit agency to allow students to ride fare-free. Funds expended from Medicaid or non-emergency medical transportation, or NEMT, should be reported as an organization paid fare on the RR20. If your agency operates more than one mode, you must capture and report the fares by mode and type of service. There are some exceptions to this requirement, as listed here in the slide, and if your agency's fare policy meets either of these criteria, please notify your NTD analyst during validation. In most cases, for rural reporters or tribal reporters, fare revenues can be tracked for each mode and therefore should be reported as actual data and not allocated. The next funding source in the form is the other directly generated funds, which are funds other than fares that your agency directly generates. Some common examples of other directly generated funds are advertising revenues, concession revenues, fundraisers, park and ride revenues, interest on investments, contract revenue for any non-full cost contracts, and donations and insurance recoveries. Now, when I say donations for this field, this refers to lump sum donations that may come from local charity foundations, fundraising events, or private individual donors. This does not refer to those donations made on board the actual transit vehicle. If you report funds in this field, you'll need to enter in an explanation in that comment box underneath it. Revenues accrued through a purchase transportation or PT agreement should only be reported if your agency receives revenues from another agency who pays the full cost of a transit service you provide, as long as it meets the NTD definition of purchase transportation. Now, this is not common for tribal agencies to report funds here, but if you do have funds to report here, please contact your NTD analyst and they can help out with confirming. The next funding source category is non-federal funds. Enter the data based on what funds your agency expended from local, state, and other non-federal sources. Local sources include tax levies, general funds, and finances from local government entities. A text description box will appear, so please ensure that you enter in an explanation of the funds reported in this field, if there are any. In the federal funds section, select all applicable federal funding sources from this list of programs. Once you select a box, the corresponding data entry fields will populate to the right. If you report funds to any other category, such as other federal funds or other FTA funds, you will be required to provide a text description to describe that funding program. Please provide the source of that funding program. That's what will really help us out as analysts. Examples of other FTA funds include those that are not already listed on those of the RR20 form, such as 5308 FTA Clean Fuels Program, as well as other US DOT funds, which will include funds that come from the Department of Transportation that are not FTA funds. These can be funds from Federal Highway Administration. So examples of other federal funds include funds from a non-FTA or non-DOT federal grant not already listed on the form, such as a Housing and Urban Development or HUD funds. Again, these will be reported in the other federal funds section, but you will need to enter in that explanation in the comment box that explains the source of the funds. The last section of the RR20 form is the annual service data section. This is where you will report the service data for each mode you report. Please be sure to only include revenue service data for the reported vehicle revenue hours and vehicle revenue miles reported in this section. Additionally, for demand response modes, the sponsored UPT should be included in the unlinked passenger trips total. So sponsored UPT is a subset of total UPT. For agencies just reporting a subsidy agreement and no service themselves, they will have a shortened version of the RR20 form, where they will report the subsidy total and its funding sources. These reporters will not report the provider's full cost of service, rather just the subsidy amount and where it came from. Next, we will discuss the Safety and Security SNS 60 form. This form was new as of report year 2023, and it has come back for report year 2024. So the bipartisan infrastructure law requires the NTD to collect data related to assaults on transit workers. Agencies who report to the NTD must report all assaults on transit workers, even if the assault does not result in an injury. Tribal agencies began reporting expanded safety data in that new SNS 60 form beginning last year. Here's a refresher on the two assault type categories, physical and non-physical. Physical assaults involve physical contact with a transit worker and can include any contact with the attacker's body, a weapon, a projectile, or another item. Physical assaults can include the assailant's saliva as well. Non-physical assaults do not involve any physical contact and can include threats or intimidation that interferes with the worker's duties. Reportable events can occur at one of the following locations: transit infrastructure, transit revenue or maintenance facilities, during transit-related maintenance activities, or involving a transit vehicle as long as it meets a reporting threshold. The SNS 60 forms require reporters to provide additional data for bus collision fatalities. Towards the bottom of that SNS 60 form, you will find fields for collision with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, and collisions with other. The other major events field that encompasses the old reportable events section you had previously reported on that RR20 safety section. Again, that's no longer, that's been replaced by this SNS 60 form. The physical and non-physical assaults section here, I mentioned a few slides ago, are reported in the first two sections at the top of the SNS 60 form. Please note that the columns represent different areas where the assault could have occurred. You may refer to the safety section of the 2024 Reduced Reporting Policy Manual for additional information on safety reporting thresholds. The third and final section of the SNS 60 form is all other reportable safety and security data. The first three rows refer to the following collision types: collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, and collisions with other, which can include things like an animal, a manhole, or a shopping cart. Please note that you should only report safety events to these categories if they meet a major event reporting threshold, which are outlined in the NTD Policy Manual for Reduced Reporters. If you have any reportable collisions that meet this criteria, you should report an annual count under the major events column. You should then report any corresponding fatalities or injuries resulting from the collision, if any are applicable. Awesome. As mentioned by Bailey in the changes and clarification section of this presentation, the next form, the Federal Funding Allocation FFA 10 form, will be locked until the RR20 and B10 forms have been saved and validated. Once those are saved and validated, the FFA 10 form will pull the data from them. And this will allow you to allocate your data between areas you serve, such as multiple states or urban areas. If changes to these forms have been made after the initial save, you may use the new Recalculate button on the FFA 10 form to pull in the most up-to-date data from the RR20 and B10 forms. In the top of the form, you will be asked to select an allocation method from the UZA reporting method drop-down menu. These include actual data, actual VRM, and other. Please note that this section should be consistent with what you've selected in prior years, unless there's been some change. Once the allocation method has been selected, you will allocate the data in the grid below. In the example included on the slide, the agency serves only one UZA, which is number 14, and they have selected actual VRM as their allocation method. So they will type their full VRM, which is 68,900, under the UZA column on the VRM row. After typing in that value, please ensure that the percentage column on the far right reads 100% to ensure that all the data has been allocated. Perfect, that does it for the FFA 10. We will now move on to the CEO certification D10 form. So the first page of the D10 form will require a confirmation of the overall accuracy and conformance of the data included in the report. Select yes if the financial, service, and asset data are accurate and conform to NTD and USOA requirements. Once finished, select the unlinked passenger trip data, blue link just there underneath the CEO certification sections to continue. In the unlinked passenger trip section, select the method used to collect unlinked passenger trip data. Please note that the used APC data checkbox should only be selected if your agency uses an automated passenger counter. And then once complete, select the general feed specification if your agency operates a fixed route mode. If your agency does not operate a fixed route mode, you will not see this tab and you may disregard. So in the GTFS section, you will be asked to confirm the current GTFS feed for your fixed route modes and make sure they are up to date. If the link is not up to date, you may proceed with updating the GTFS feed in the P50 form. Perfect. That's it for the report forms, and we will now move on to the report validation and submission section. Analysts will send reports back with open issues if they have follow-up questions regarding the report data. Validation includes, but is not limited to, time series checks against your agency's historical data, logic checks between data items on different forms, and checks for values that fall outside the typical industry range. To resolve validation issues, you can either revise the data to reflect accurate information or provide a text explanation that addresses the issue to establish accuracy. Please avoid providing generalized responses such as the data is correct, since these types of responses do not offer a clear explanation or picture for why the data changed. The more information or context that you can provide early on in the reporting process, it can help reduce the number of report turnovers before closeout. So once the analyst has reviewed the report, they will return it to you with open validation issues. As the report revision count increases, the revision time period decreases, as the report should have fewer and fewer issues with each submission. Be sure to address any items that were cited in last year's closeout letter. If you fail to correct any issues stated in the 2023 closeout letter, that data may be marked as questionable in report year 2024. If you have questions about last year's closeout letter, please contact your validation analyst. Oh, and to recap, each report form has a regular save button as well as a save and validate button. If you save and validate the form will appear as green on the summary table. However, if you make changes to that form afterwards, you must save and validate again to turn that box green. If you make changes to a form that has already been validated and hit the normal save button, the form will revert back to red and will not turn green until you select save and validate again. To view issues on a specific form, you can enter the form and select View Issues in the bottom right corner. Alternatively, you can you can return to the report summary page or the related actions tab and select view issues. This option will allow you to view all issues across the report. Once view issues has been selected, you'll be presented with a list of issues. To view a specific issue, please click on the link or click on the issue, which will highlight it blue and scroll down to the bottom. Once you've scrolled down, you'll be presented with the full issue information and a comment box. If the issue can be resolved by an appropriate explanation, you may type your comment in the box and select Save on the bottom right. If the issue requires a data revision, such as a typo, you can select the View Related Form button to go directly to the affected form where you can revise the data if needed. When addressing open issues on the report, please ensure to carefully requires an explanation. Please provide a detailed comment that gives the analyst a clear picture of the service change that led to the issue. Please refrain from entering comments such as the data is correct. If you're unsure of how to explain an issue, please refrain from commenting and contact your analyst instead of commenting, I have questions about this. Your analyst can usually help you through email to figure out a response that should be added to the system there. Reports may be considered incomplete if there are outstanding issues such as non-conformance to NTD guidelines, failure to respond to validation, or copying and pasting comments that do not explain the validation issue, or resubmitting a report without saving data changes. Now, if issues like this are left outstanding by the end of the reporting cycle, FTA may cite them in the closeout letter, so please keep note of that. To submit the annual report, please first ensure that all forms have been saved and validated and that no open issues remain. Once confirmed, the CEO or CEO delegate user can proceed with submitting the report by first selecting related actions and then submit annual report package. If all forms have been saved and validated and no open issues remain, you will see a continue button to confirm the submission of the annual report. If there are open issues or unvalidated forms, the system will provide a list of these issues that will need to be addressed prior to the report submission. In summary, this is a timeline of the NTD report validation process. Please contact your analyst if you have any questions about the process or about any aspect of your NTD report. Now, looking ahead to report year 2024, you will receive a welcome letter as soon as your assigned analyst, you will receive a welcome letter from your assigned NTD analyst when your report forms become available in the system. The welcome letter will contain links to many helpful resources to assist with the report, as well as a checklist that's really helpful and can assist you in guiding through completing the report. If you encounter any issues while completing your report, you can contact your analyst, which I know I've been saying a lot, but I really truly mean it. And your analyst can assist you with validation questions or just general questions about the report. All right, that concludes our presentation. Here's our contact information for the Team Rural, as well as the NTD program contacts, as well as the help desk, which is open from Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I will turn it back over to Lori to close us out.
Thank you. Just real quick, everyone, thank you for participating. You will be getting an email shortly that will have a link to take an evaluation for this session. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. The emails that were just on the screen are in your handouts, should be on the last page. And you can always reach me at NTI. And if there's no more questions, I guess that's it. I'll see everyone next time. Thank you to Reed and Bailey.